Before we get started, I'll just take you through briefly what we to expect today. So as usual, we have just some basic housekeeping during the session. Your microphones will be disabled, and during presentations or interventions from speakers, please use the chat if you have questions. We will have a dedicated time at the end of each allocated discussion of each allocated panel and speaker to ask questions and have discussion. And you're also welcome to raise your hand, virtually raise your hand to raise a question as well, apart from the chat. And to help those in the room, when speaking, please identify yourself with your name, country, organization. And just to give an overview of what exactly we'll be looking at today. So this webinar will be here for 1 hour. So it's really just giving a short overview of what the Caribbean region should look forward to and be prepared for COP30. Utilize some of the opportunities that will foster preparation for BTRs under the ETF. So we'll take a look at the first hand to look at some of the key negotiation items and priorities, and then we'll take a turn to look at some of the transparency specific areas. So to share some of these outstanding challenges on the enhanced transparency framework and accessing funds for enabling activities. And then of course, to get insights from those of you here, who many of you are a part of these transparency teams in your countries. So we're at 1 hour today, and before we start with remarks, we'll just have a short group photo, and then we'll be having our welcoming remarks from Katsira Kamalo, who is our lead here at the Global CIBIT GSP project at UNFCCC, UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center. And then we'll take a look at the key negotiation items, and we'll hear from Ambassador Janine Felsen. And then we'll complete our session today with a short panel with our experts, transparency experts and negotiators, who will be talking about some of the overview and insights on the transparency elements heading into COP. And then we'll close, of course, we'll have some time for discussion, and then we'll have a close in the next hour. And with that, if you are able to, I invite everyone who's able to and willing to turn on their cameras. We're a small group today, and also noting that we have a lot of our colleagues who are wrapped up in hurricane readiness and preparation right now. So we thank all of you who are with us for joining us. And we keep all our colleagues in Jamaica and soon Cuba in mind as Hurricane Melissa hits us. Okay, ready? We have some beautiful backgrounds and beautiful offices. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Now with that, and it's nice to see all our colleagues and see we have all over the Caribbean. We have Grenada, Barbados, Cuba, Guyana, Belize, Bahamas, and a few others. All right, but without any further delay, I would now like to turn over to Ms. Katsira Kamalo, who is our Senior Advisor and Global Lead at the CIBIT GSP project, to deliver our welcoming remarks. Over to you, Katsira.
Thank you, Brittany. and welcome to all the colleagues from the Caribbean. Greetings from Copenhagen in Denmark here. I'm really excited and happy to actually be part of this conversation. And I really don't have opening remarks because I don't want this meeting to be official, but I don't want it to be formal, but I want it to be so informal. So I'm not going to really bore you with these formal welcome remarks, but I just want to say it's a pleasure for me to be part of this conversation and listen in as you are discussing on the road to COP30. And just to thank all of you for your support and collaboration as working with CBGSP, and to also reaffirm that the CBGSP is here to support you on your journey of transparency. So we know that this year is such a special case. I think going to COP30, there's going to be a number of transparency discussions on the negotiation table. And I think I want to just commend Brittany for bringing us together here before getting into the negotiation mode, that we have this honest discussion and also discuss among ourselves, those who are going and those that are not going, in terms of what are the key challenges when it comes to transparency that we will want the people who are going to COP30 to discuss on our behalf. And for me, one key, I think, issue that has been mentioned over the past years, I think it's around how we bring about the support that developing countries require, especially seeds, when it comes to transparency. And we have seen quite a lot of leadership from seeds in terms of submitting their NDC 3.0. We have seen also a lot of commitment and leadership from seeds submitting the first BTRs, which really show that despite the challenges that we face as small island state countries, there is really commitment. But also we don't want to downplay the challenges that we face. So this is where such conversation come in, to be really honest in terms of, as much as there is this commitment, as much as there is the leadership, there are these really realities that we live in our countries in terms of what support we need when it comes to financial support, when it comes to technical support, when it comes to technological support that will make the NDCs translate to action, that will make the information, the data that we have get into inform ambition and also climate proof our economy. So this is the most important, I think, place that we can have to discuss among ourselves and make sure that we really are giving the people who are going to the negotiations the information that is grounded on realities. So we know that in the negotiation, one of the agenda items is around support to developing countries on meeting the obligation on Article 13. And this discussion has been happening over the past few years. And I think now that countries have submitted their first BTR, we have also seen countries have made submission on the real challenges that they have faced in preparing the first BTRs. So I think what we want to see is a decision that is ensuring that the support is really available and is really accessible to countries. And that is the most important thing. And I think one also key agenda item around support is the issue of the CGE, TORs, in terms of how the CGE provide technical support to countries. We know the challenges that the CGE has faced over the past year with limited resources to enable it deliver on its mandate. But what does that mean? Because if the CGE doesn't have the support it needs to deliver on the mandate, it means that developing countries, the seeds, are not able to get the support that they need. So this then becomes a key important issue for negotiations. I think that I will say it will be very important to discuss. Also, one of the mandated events will be this World Cafe, where the UNFCCC has brought together the JEF and the implementing agencies around how do we make the resources accessible to countries? How do we ensure that we close the gaps between one reporting cycle to the next? So I also want to encourage that you have the discussion, the honest discussions during this World Cafe on what are the challenges that you face in accessing JEF resources, what are the challenges that you face in working with the implementing agencies of the JEF, because if you are honest about this conversation, I think it leads us to identifying the best solutions that countries can actually have, and also be honest, are the resources enough? Are they coming at the right time? So this is all the issues that are going to be useful, and I'm looking forward that we will discuss these issues, and the negotiators that we have that are going to be leading the negotiations on our behalf are going to really ensure that issues are negotiated in a fair manner and ensure that seeds and all developing countries are getting the support that they need when it comes to technical capacities, when it comes to the financial resources that are required to deliver on this. And I hope that also the negotiators will have the courage to be honest and ensure that these messages that we are giving them today are going to carry them and take them forward to the negotiation table. So I'm really looking forward to an honest and open discussion, colleagues, and really wish you all the best, and hope that we are going to get at least something out of COP30. And this will be very useful to inform the next PTR, the next NDC, and ensuring that we get the resource that we think are going to be possible to ensure that at national level, we are able to implement NDC, and we are also able to track progress of the implementation of our NDC. So with that, colleagues, thank you very much, Brittany, and really looking forward and want to encourage, especially the practitioners, people who are really working around preparing the PTRs, to really express the challenges that they are facing, and also to encourage that negotiators take the message with courage and ensure that this is taken to the negotiation table, and we are hoping for a best outcome. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katsira, for setting the tone and also setting the tone of the session that we'll have with our panelists on the transparency aspect. As you know, the CIVIT GSP is, stands for Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, and in most cases, that is the highlight of the discussion. And I'm also glad to see that in this room, actually, we have quite a bit of negotiators who are at the COP, as well as those practitioners that you mentioned, Katsira. So thanks very much for setting the tone and setting the tone for the discussion. And now it's my distinguished pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker, Ambassador Janine Felsen. She is the permanent representative of Belize to the United Nations and has been a longstanding senior diplomat to Belize, as well as CARICOM and AOSIS. Has been a longtime champion for Caribbean priorities, SIDS priorities, and not only climate change, but across the sustainable development landscape. And so welcome, Ambassador Felsen. Very happy that you could join us this morning. And so I'll hand it over to you, to take us through some of what are the key priorities that the Caribbean, that impacts the Caribbean broadly as we head into COP30.
Thank you very much, Brittany. I sincerely appreciate the invitation, and I want to make sure that you can hear me because I get a message that I have poor network quality. You can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. I originally had planned to share a slide, show the Caribbean priorities for COP, but I know you only have an hour, so you might just share that afterward. But what I wanted to just do and sort of reaction to the open injustice. First of all, transparency is a key tool. It's a key tool. It's not the endpoint. It's a key tool for the Paris Agreement to ensure integrity and accountability in the work that we're doing in relation to climate action. It's very important that we really bring focus on those issues around the biennial transparency report. Not insofar as the reporting is concerned itself, but insofar as once the reports are there, we're actually taking the time to review what is happening. And I fear whenever we go into the negotiations, we're only focused on the process. We're only focused on the process to get us to the next process and not on the substance. So in terms of the priorities for the Caribbean and specifically in the Caribbean community, I want to highlight that it remains the 1.5 remains the North Star of the Caribbean's priorities. It is what defines what we want from mitigation. And because we know that we're going to fall short on our mitigation targets, it is what defines what then we will need to look for in terms of our adaptation requirements. It is what then we look to as the responses for loss and damage. And it is what we look to for the finance. And that is really critical because 1.5 as a benchmark, which we now know from the International Court of Justice, is a legal imperative. It's not just something moral, it's not just something scientific. It is a legal imperative. We need to ensure that our work is tracking alongside that 1.5 pathway. And what that means for transparency then is when you get your biennial transparency reports from any and every country, we are going to be examining and interrogating those transparency reports alongside the 1.5 threshold. And what does that look like? Well, we had a global stocktake, which had an outcome, which had a whole list of commitments, calls to action to align or to course correct our actions with 1.5. And I think it's important that we reintegrate that into our consideration. Now, there have been a lot of challenges about integrating that GST outcome into the process, but that doesn't mean that we can't ourselves use it when we go to interrogate the VTRs. So I wanted to make that point. Second point is that we will necessarily need to focus on the finance elements. Whilst this isn't necessarily a finance COP, we had that last year. We tend to give these headlines to each COP. This year it's implementation and adaptation COP or the Amazon COP. But finance remains a critical component, not just finance to do your BTR, which is important, but finance to actually take the action, finance to do mitigation, finance to do adaptation, finance to respond to loss and damage. And what we see, notwithstanding a new collective quantified goal of $300 billion, what we're seeing is a massive, massive gap. And it's a gap that not only comes in terms of the private sector finance, it's a gap that's increasing now with public sector finance because our traditional development partners are now regressing. They're now walking back some of their commitments on finance. And we've seen it in the development finance context, and you will see it in the climate finance context. So it's important. 1.5, we need to achieve a certain threshold of ambition. And to reach that ambition, we need that finance. And that goes also with the adaptation, scaling up adaptation. This year around, we might be looking at renewing a commitment to going even beyond that doubling of adaptation finance commitment. I think that's really important. I think the third and final point, because I've spoken long enough, is in relation to what you're focused on today in terms of the transparency. And indeed, the agenda item on the provision of financial and technical support has been there for a long time. I think you need to look at the entire agenda in a very dynamic way and understand that you might not necessarily get what you want in everything in one spot, but you do have to spread it across the whole landscape of the agenda. So you do want to look at it in each one of those issues. And when we talk about provision of financial and technical support, let us not forget capacity building. Let us not forget technology. This year, there's an opportunity to develop a technology implementation program. The crux of that really is about ensuring that there's finance for transfer of technology. That's an obligation under the convention. It's an obligation that has been transferred into the Paris Agreement. And I think it's really important that we do that. We ensure that we do have finance that's available to enable us to acquire or to develop technology that's appropriate for our scale and for our needs and priorities. I will end it there. Brittany, I sent you my PDF. I think that there are a lot of issues that we need to address because there are a lot of issues that have been carried over from the intersessional into COP30, but we need to really remain focused. Keep the focus on the 1.5, keep the focus on the integrity of the system as a whole, keep the focus on ensuring that there's support within that system. And then I think we can at least not get what we can out of COP30, but get what we need out of COP30. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I wish you all a successful discussion.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Felsen, for really giving the high points. I know there's a lot more nuance and a lot more technical areas under each of those points that you made. But I do agree that keeping 1.5, the 1.5 target as the North Star for SIDS, not just Caribbean SIDS, but all small island developing states will be crucial for us to get what we need, like you mentioned, out of COP30. And I'm also glad that you brought up some of these nuances, especially for our colleagues who don't regularly attend the COPs, to get an understanding of the how things work, how each COP is framed, this year being the implementation and adaptation COP, and each COP generally informally having a theme place, for that presidency to really achieve by the end of the 2 weeks. Thank you so much for sharing those key points. The gaping gap in finance, also the doubling the adaptation finance point, which is crucial for island states. As you know, continuously battered by natural disasters, and we see our brothers and sisters, currently, going through one of the biggest storms of the century. So, thank you for placing the process, the COP30 process, and aligning it with what is actually happening, on the ground, and how it makes sense for countries. I know we have a short session today, and I thank you for summing that up, very, very effectively. But I would like to just refer again to our audience. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat as we go along. Ambassador Felsen, if you're here towards the end of the session, we'd open it up again for any questions that our audience might have had for you. So that's just a reminder to our audience as well. I know we have a tight session, but really we're hitting the highlights and not going into the technical details of each of these areas. So we're right at the midpoint of the session, which takes us perfectly into our next segment of this morning's webinar, where we'll be looking at the transparency specific areas, and we have with us three negotiators who commonly go to these climate change COPs to really talk about what are the heart of the transparency discussion that Ambassador Felsen began to introduce for us. And so this segment will explore the outstanding challenges in ETF implementation, including some of the activities for enabling activities, the financing that's required, and as well talk about some of the needs that we have from the consultative group of experts. And so that's the CGE for our colleagues here who may not be familiar with all these acronyms. So I'd like to welcome our panelists, our speakers, Ms. Camille Salazar. She's the MRV officer for Belize at the Belize National Climate Change Office. She's also the transparency coordinator for the island, for the Alliance of Small Island States. So that's all small island states. And so she brings a wealth of knowledge from the transparency thematic area. We're also joined by Ms. Gina Bell, who's joining us from Barbados. She's the project manager and coordinator for the Barbados Civic Project, as well as a longstanding participant in these climate change COPs and in the transparency area, also having been involved in the various transparency reports in her country. And then also we have Mr. Orlando Rey Santos joining us from Cuba. He is a member of the consultative groups of experts, and he's the representative from the small island developing states. And so we have a unique perspective from each of them. You're here, and if you're able to join us with your cameras, so our audience can see, and that's Orlando joining again. So we can start, and we want to get a framing specifically on what exactly are we to expect from transparency. I know we heard a lot of this in summary from Katsila, from her remarks, as well as Ambassador Felsen gave an introduction into some of the transparency elements. Camille, if you're here with us. Yes, I see you. Give us one moment, colleagues. We have just a small connection issue with one of our participants here. I think we're joined by everyone now. But what we might have to do is have you start us off, Gina, if that's okay with you, because I see we have Camille who is coming in with she's a bit of a connection issue here. Orlando. But you can start us off if you don't mind, Gina. When we're looking at transparency, some of the main areas, of course, the transparency related reports that are relevant for countries to really report on what they have been doing is their biennial transparency report. We know that Barbados is in this process of preparing your biennial transparency report. But what we'd like to ask you is maybe give us an idea of what being involved in the preparation process of Barbados's recently submitted national determined contribution, the preparation process for your BTR1, and some of the lessons learned from your civic project. What type of practical guidance can be shared with our colleagues, with our countries, to help inform this dialogue on ETF implementation.
Okay, thanks, Brittany, and good morning to everybody. I'm just going to share, yes, the lessons learned from the process of Barbados preparing its 2025 NDC. Thankfully, we received assistance from the GCF through the 5Cs, through a project that they had to prepare updated NDCs for 3 countries. So that was Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and Grenada. That project was about $2.4 million to assist the 3 countries in preparing their updated reports. And that process took about 9 months in terms of getting the report prepared, and we took another 3 to 4 months to get the report approved by cabinet and submitted. So in total, about 15 months from beginning to submission of the report. Um, and this is just to set the context in terms of the support that is required and the length of time that it takes to get the report that is to a standard for submission. The engagement allowed for support on the analysis of the mitigation and adaptation actions occurring in country, a costing of the NDC, some capacity building along through the process, the creation of an implementation plan, a climate finance plan, some emission mitigation assessments, stakeholder engagement, the creation of a communication strategy and lessons learned document. And then, of course, the drafting of the supporting documents to the NDC, the draft NDC. The funding, though, was limited, as you would expect, given that it was to support 3 countries and not just one. And therefore, the consultants were only able to support the country up to the draft document, draft final. So once the report went to cabinet, it was up to the ministry then to do the final changes ahead of submission. The other limitations that were identified in terms of process and how much the consultants could do to inform the preparation of the updated document is that Barbados's greenhouse gas inventory is not current, not up to date. So that was identified as a major challenge in terms of being able to do projections and so on to inform the document. It was also identified that there is a need for the alignment of policy planning with the implementation of action across sectors. So those were the 2 major limitations process-wise that were highlighted by the consultants. In terms of the challenges, experience, and the lessons learned, so a major highlight was that the institutional coordination in country needs to be strengthened. So the fragmentation of the climate initiative across agencies and projects makes it difficult to formulate a national strategy. And therefore, it's advised that going forward and in preparation for the next cycle of reporting, that is worked on. And therefore, future NDC updates should prioritize more streamlined governance approach to link mitigation and adaptation actions, and then overall, national strategy towards addressing climate change issues. The other major point was the enhancement of data collection and integration into an MRV system. So the lack of a fully integrated MRV system means that critical data that is generated through projects um, is not captured because there are misalignments in timelines. So you have projects at varying stages, and there's not the process of continuous data collection. So sometimes then we miss being able to integrate that information into the reports because we don't have data in a format that is ready to be analyzed and integrated. So it's recognized that we need to work on developing this MRV, a robust MRV system that is cross-sectoral and works across projects and collects data in a way that is useful. The other major um, lesson learned was about balancing mitigation, adaptation, and resilience priorities. So long and short, it is that we need to set targets that are realistic, attainable, manageable, within the timeframes that are set. And then the last one that I would highlight is the strengthening social inclusion and just transition considerations into the report. So we sought to ensure that gender, and we touched on just transition in the report, but the consultancy did not have specialized capacity to do proper analysis of these social considerations. So recommendation going forward too is to ensure that we have that, we build up that capacity so that that is better reflected in future reports. So the concerns that were highlighted that pose limitations in this process are not new. So these are similar to the limitations that were highlighted in the previous process of the NDC preparation and the process of the preparation of the national communication, our second national communication that was submitted in 2018. So after the submission of the national communication in 2018, Barbados embarked on getting resources through the CBIT process. So 2019, we were gun-ho head on in terms of project concept, and then COVID came. So we had to pick back that up in 2021. And we were able to get the funding approved in 2022, but it meant that some of the concepts and activities that were proposed initially now were out of date. So in terms of our experience with the CBIT process, we have a 36-month project approved. As I mentioned, it was approved in 2022. We are well into 2025 and significantly delayed in terms of implementation of the technical components of that project. And the reason for that is some of the issues that were highlighted already this morning. So the availability of funding is one thing, but accessibility then is another issue. And even when you get approval for the funding, then accessibility for disbursements then becomes another issue, because depending on your implementing partner, they each have specific criteria that have to be met in order to get a disbursement. And without proper planning, that can significantly delay the actual implementation of the project. So that is what we have experienced here in Barbados in terms of the alignment of the access to the funds with the government system of planning and budgeting. That's one delay, but also then attaining the criteria to be able to access the funding through the implementing partner. So what we have learned so far is that next time, certain things must be put in place even ahead of requesting the funds. And this is requesting the funds from the Jeff, because to have an 18-month project and 24, not 18 months, 36-month project, 24 months in, you're now satisfying criteria for a first disbursement. It significantly then impacts the quality, the technical outputs that you're able to get from the project. So the status of our CBIT project now is we are well into a procurement process, and that is another significant area of delay, but of course recognized as an important delay. So we must procure efficiently, effectively, and transparently. So we also have to take that into consideration in future planning. When we have large projects, you have to go through the lengthy procurement processes, and that takes time, and it therefore impacts the outputs that you're able to get. So our CBIT project is intending to update our inventory and bring it to current, and that will be 2024. It is also seeking to significantly enhance capacity within country to be able to collect data, manage data, and also prepare inventory reports. It is recognized that this will be an ongoing process of building capacity, and we're looking to build the capacity of sector experts that are existing, but also create a training framework where we have graduates coming out of university and also college level that have a background and an interest in doing this type of work, so that you're not all solely relying on government employees who have other portfolios to take care of and therefore can't prioritize this work. What we're trying to do is build a training framework where we have quite a few experts in country, particularly to ensure that there is good data, because that's where everything starts essentially. And then the project is also seeking to set up the framework for the MRV system. So whereas we might not have all the data to populate, the project would identify what is required and build up the system so that as we go ahead with future enabling activities, be it BTR1, third national communication, the system would already be in there and ready to accept the data, and you'll have user profiles and people using the system, and it basically is set up and ready and raring to go. So that is where we are in terms of our experience with the NDC process and where we are at in terms of CBIT. And as I mentioned, we really had intended to have CBIT completed by the middle of next year. It's looking like we may need to extend another year, which then would delay our BTR process and our possibly also our next national communications process. But once implemented properly, then the idea is that we have a firm basis to build on going forward, and we will have to keep going back and saying that we don't have this and we don't have that. The CBIT project is ready to lay out a firm foundation to go forward, especially with the in-house capacity and in-country capacity.
Thanks so much, Gina. That was a wealth of experience that you've shared. I think it really speaks to the nature of what happens on the ground in the office as the persons implementing the projects and the timeline delays that are experienced. Certainly not a singular experience. I think this is generally a very common experience for small teams, countries with small teams. But thank you. I won't comment anymore because I will also leave also ask our other panelists to reflect on this. I know we'll be speaking about next, how some of the areas of this experience that Barbados has had, links into, some of the negotiating areas that are covered. Okay, but before we move on, we have a question. Go ahead, Milena.
You have the word?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Gina. Let me introduce myself. I am Milena Niño. I've been supporting different countries, including Belize, St. Lucia, Dominica, many other countries, and maybe I can support you in some of the topics that you have touched base. So I'll reach out to you in an email. You'll hear from me. I'm Barbadian right now. Like I live here in Barbados, so I think we can set up a meeting and I'll have some good ideas for you. All right.
Thanks very much. I will listen out.
Excellent. I love this. This is a room of also our transparency practitioners. Thank you, Milena. Katsiwa?
Thanks, Brittany, and thanks, Gina, for that. I just want to clarify something. Maybe I misunderstood. Is it the intention of Barbados to finalize the implementation of the National CBIT project first before you start the BTR? And if that is the case, why you choose this approach?
Yeah, so that is the idea, and largely because of the manpower to manage the projects and to manage the processes. And in reality, the two processes will be speaking to the same stakeholders and trying to achieve a lot of the same thing. Our inventory, our last inventory that was submitted is up to 2010. So we recognize that significant effort must be put into updating the inventory, we think, before we embark on the BTR process, which was the idea. We expected that it would have been done by now. So recognizing that the process is delayed, but we also don't want to embark on another process and then put a burden on the executing agency, which is this ministry. If you have a better recommendation, then we're open to listening and gauging how to best plan to have the different processes work with one another and to not have extended periods between processes, recognizing that the funding is available.
Excellent. Thanks, Gina, and thank you, Kitsia, for making that. I think definitely we can also sidebar this, Gina. I know from the Civic GSP team and also from the Secretariat, the resounding message has been your first VTR doesn't have to be perfect, but it can start. And I can already imagine that the effort that you were doing under your Civic project, like your greenhouse gas inventory, will already, make up for the efforts that you will do in your VTR. But yes, I see, can see already the mark that we'll have a topic some other time. But excellent. Thank you again, Gina, for really bringing this to perspective, bringing a perspective from the implementing as the ministry being the implementing partner for these various enabling activities. So now I'd like to turn it over to Camille Salazar, joining us from Belize. She's also the transparency coordinator for AOSIS. And Camille, if you could take us through and summarize what are the main topics that we are going to expect under the transparency thematic area that will be covered at COP. What are some of the most pressing areas for SIDS? And then you can also speak to, in your framing, how how we as a region can better position ourselves to secure the support that we need. Over to you, Camille.
Hi, Brittany. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me first to speak on the webinar. Apologies earlier for dropping off the call. I don't know what happened with my device, but I'm glad I was able to rejoin. But just to go straight into it in the interest of time, because I know we're almost at the hour. Um, the main there's two big agenda items at COP30 this year, while there are several other agenda items when it comes to the reporting under the convention, under the Paris Agreement. These are mostly just synthesis reports that we would take note of. But at SBs in Germany this year, one thing that all parties could agree on was that we would need to put or focus more energy on the two bigger agenda items. And these are firstly the provision of financial and technical support for reporting under both the convention and the Paris Agreement. And the second item is the review of the CGE in terms of its composition, its COR, and its extension. The CGE's current term ends next year, 2026. So what we were negotiating is whether we should extend it for another 5 years or make it a permanent body. Most parties agree that it should be a permanent body because we don't really envision that we would ever not need the support of the CGE. I think all of us on the call here has benefited from the different training and workshops and technical support that they've provided throughout the years, especially as different reports are due. So we're fighting to make it a permanent body. In addition to that, there's also the POR, which at the moment is fine as it provides support to countries to transition to the enhanced transparency framework under under the Paris Agreement, helping countries prepare to submit their first BTRs, and it also provided support for countries working on their BURs. But an area of discussion that came up where we couldn't agree was where some countries were suggesting to remove support for BURs, arguing that we're now transitioning to the ETF, so countries would only require support for BTRs. But I mean, I think there's several of our partner countries in the region who's still working on their final BURs, and would still require support, and especially technical support on different areas in completing their BURs. So we still see a need for this to remain in the TOR. So this is something else that has come up. And then finally, the composition of the CGE board. As is, it seems to be sort of balanced, looking depending on where you're looking from, but at least in the moment it's sort of acceptable. But another issue that came up was um, adding additional developed countries. So we, of course, we were against this as it's AOSIS on a whole, and G77 and China. But you could see there's several contentious topics just under this one agenda item alone. So we do see the need to focus on this more and maybe not put as much energy on those other reporting items. And then in addition to that, the second agenda item that I mentioned, the second big one, the provision of financial and technical support for reporting. There's several issues that we always have with this agenda item over the past several years, where, for example, we try our best, and I think Gina spoke to a lot of it. Um, we understand that there's a lot of different avenues out there that exist where countries can get support for their BTRs, BURs, NATCOMs, doing inventories. But the issue still remains that even though this support is out there, there's still so many issues with accessing this support. The time it takes from getting approval, for example, to the time of actually getting those funds in country and getting access to those funds where you can actually start to implement your project. And this is a real issue that several of us face, all of us different Caribbean countries face. It comes down to a lot of different things. And I think Gina said it as well, the manpower. For us, I mean, many of our offices are maybe 6 to 10 people, and we're all sharing responsibilities, all wearing multiple hats, trying to get so many things done. So it's difficult to really work on just one thing and implement that one project, or focus all your attention on just one thing. So that's a real issue for several of us. And in addition to that, we also want to make sure that developed countries continue to provide the support that they have agreed to, or that has already been established in previous decisions under these different COPs, and make sure that that support is being provided to developing countries, um, especially SIDS. So this is something else that will come up at the COP30 in Brazil that we'll have to focus on. But I'll also like to take this opportunity to say that there's a World Cup style event happening actually on the first day of COP. And we even fought to have it on the first day of COP because we know that this day there'll still be um, fighting to adopt the agenda, and most likely there won't be any formal negotiations taking place. So we imagine that everyone would have the availability to attend this World Cafe style event. And really it's an opportunity, and I encourage everyone on the call and for you to share it with your colleagues to attend, because we'll have Jeff there and its implementing entities um, in the room. And so it'll be an opportunity for us to speak directly with them as parties. Because sometimes the issues don't necessarily stem from Jeff, or all of them don't necessarily stem from just Jeff alone, but also the implementing agencies. So having everyone in the room and having that conversation in front of everyone present, I think it will be a good opportunity for them to hear us and understand us better, so that when we go back into the negotiation room itself, we should have an easier time adopting a decision.
Thanks, Camille, uh, for sharing those remarks and really attuning us to what we should expect for transparency. You mentioned those two areas. You spoke on the CGE, and then you finished on this the item of provision of finance and technical support. So if you can as well, let us know if that World Cafe event will also be, if it will be streamed or not. It might not be, I imagine, if it's on the if it's happening within the bounds of the COP. But I think thanks for sharing that. And also just to highlight that, these are some of the things, fighting for agenda space, ensuring that there's, priority in what, what items can be discussed within the means, within the bounds of a two-week conference. It is also important. So please also let us know if you have questions for Camille or comments. Please let us know and put it in the chat. I know we're right on the top of the hour, but I would like to give, if you could indulge us another 10 minutes or so, hear from our last speaker, our last panelist, Mr. Orlando Rey from Cuba. If you're here with us, Orlando, we'd like to ask you to give us your perspective. If you have any additional comments you'd like to share from your perspective as a member of the consultative group of experts, what this means, going into COP. Is there anything additional that you would like to share with us?
Thank you very much, Brittany. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I apologize because I have been disconnected for some part of the webinar because domestic conditions. But now I am connected. I hope I will be able to finish. I will be very short. I understand we are running out of time, but thank you for the opportunity of participating in the webinar, and thank you for the opportunity of rejoining with some colleagues from the negotiation and from the region. Just some brief comments on the general transparency issue. I think it's very important to build on what we already have. To report is not a completely new process. We are accustomed to report and to produce the national communications and to produce the BUR. So now the process is more demanding, more stringent. There are more requirements. We have the MPGs, but still the issue of reporting is not completely new. So we don't need to depart from zero. We can work on what we already have. The other issue is that because of that and because the relevance of climate change for our countries, we already have some bodies. We have institutions, we have commission, we have ministries with mandates, we have some level of regulation. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can work with what we already have. And I personally don't recommend to create a new commission, new body, if not strictly necessary, to try to work on the basis of what we have. But I think that the more important issue for transparency is to make the system relevant for the domestic work. So I think that reporting and producing the BTR is a complementary product of the transparency. The most important issue with transparency is to have the domestic capacity of knowing what we are doing on adaptation and mitigation, on to know if we are doing the more effective action, the cost of the actions, the indicator to evaluate the action, the baseline, the target we have, and all that issues are relevant for the national work. And in addition to that, we report. But if we put the report as the main task, then we are in some way overburdening the national work without a clear justification for doing that. Back to the CGE. The CGE, as I have been said, is a very important body that have been working this year with very constraints, but still the CGE produces the report, which is available. We can share the link in the chat in a moment, about the problems, constraints, lessons learned, and capacity building needs on the process of developing national communication, BUR and BTR. Of course, as this is a report of this year, the amount of BTR on the reviews is still limited, but there is very important information in this report, which is available and will be presented in COP30. Inside the review process, I think that is important to take as a process because we are reporting in very limited time, just 2 years. So when if we produced our first BTR last year in December, we are overlapping the process of preparing the second BTR with a review of the first BTR. So we need to take in a systematic way because we have limited human resources, limited capacities. And for that, it's very important that the regional collaboration, because we are small countries with a limited impact in the greenhouse emissions, with an important focus on adaptation, and maybe we don't need to have every country an expert for every specific aspect of the inventory, for example. And then we can share that expertise and be able to work regionally to alleviate in some way the national burden of producing the report. And finally, on this issue of the review, it's very important to include as many experts as possible as experts in the review of other countries, because that allows us to have people who are prepared and having a view of different reporting of different countries. And you know the process. We need to recognize the expert in our national registry, and then the experts are invited to do the examination, and then we have experts from the region working in different parts of the whole work and having the experience to devolve that experience to the national team. So it's very important to put that expert in that road and to open the opportunities for as many experts as possible for our countries to participate as a reviewer in the international process. Finally, you asked me in the previous question about the multilateral, I always forgot the full name, the Facilitative Multilateral Consideration of Progress. Yeah. I think that this is not new neither. This process already exists. Those who produced BUR know the process, but now again is reformulated under the transparency of the Paris Agreement, and it's important for many reasons. From the start, because it's a space to showcase our result, to showcase our progress, to showcase what we are doing, our challenge also, but also what are our main achievement. So it's an opportunity to showing what we are doing as country to support the global fight against climate change. And it's also an opportunity to look for support, because if we produce a clear narrative in this exercise of facilitative sharing of consideration of progress, then we are producing conditions for maybe accessing financing or for knowing where the financing may be available for our project. And finally, of course, we are creating capacities on the preparation for that process. It's a process, as you know, as all the transparency process is facilitative, is non-punitive. So it's a space for learning, a space for showing, and a space for looking for new resources for our agendas. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent, Orlando. Thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for giving your rich insights on transparency. And also, giving the insight also towards the end of the process, end of this reporting process. There's the review process and this facilitated consideration of progress. And I agree that it is an important place where countries, especially for developing countries, to signal what their needs are in terms of finance, in terms of capacity and technology as well. And luckily for us, those sessions that are streamed live and are available by the UNFCCC Secretariat. So countries who have submitted their BTRs can go and witness, either if they're in the room or also participate online to see how other countries are reviewed and how they share their progress from their BTRs. But I just want to say thank you again, Orlando. You hit a variety of points, making sure that these processes and our reporting processes work for us and within our small teams. And also making sure that we use the limited resources that we have and use our regional utilize our regional expertise and experts in the room so that we can make this process one that's more facilitated for everyone, and it's easier for everyone with our unique situations. Colleagues, I know we're right out of time, but I would like to ask if you do have any additional comments or questions, please put them in the chat. Even if we're not able to address them all today, we will be sharing this information with you after this webinar, as well as will be posted on the Climate Transparency Platform event page. And the last order of business is if you can kindly give us some feedback on this short webinar. You know, it was quite short today. The link is also in the chat. Just confirming if you can see the screen. It's also letting you know that the link is in the chat, so you can also, which will also be open for the next 48 hours. And in the meantime, I would like to thank very much to our speakers, Ambassador Felsen, Gina, Camille, Orlando, Petsiwe. Thank you all for sharing your insights. Thank you for providing this rich discussion for our network, for the Caribbean Network. And we hope to have you continuously engaged leading up to COP, and wishing you all the very best going into COP 30. Thank you very much, everyone, and wishing you an excellent day. Rest of your day.
Thank you, Brittany. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
you,
everyone.
Brittany.
Goodbye.